Yesterday, I briefly touched on this idea of having a secret that you're keeping from yourself, that in any area of your life, to have a look and see, do I know more about this on an intuitive level than I'm letting myself believe? With something like money, where for many, many, many people, money seems to be such a struggle. Is there something that you have tucked away somewhere secretly on an awareness level, on an intuitive level, that would make your life a lot easier with money than it has seemed to be up until now? It actually, when you really think about it, would be a pretty big secret to most people that money is easy, because most people think that money is a difficulty and money is a source of stress and money is a problem. And you've always got to be thinking about how to make more of it. And you've always got to be dealing with it. And you've always got to be struggling with it. And to find out that money is actually very easy would be a pretty well kept secret. To find out that it's much, 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 much easier to have money, to make money, to receive money, to have money just show up with very little effort, if any, would be a very well kept secret. And I'm sure if you're like me at all, whether it's money or anything else, you've probably done programs and done courses and done classes trying to figure out the secret to different things. I mean, even, probably the single most popular book on manifesting is literally called The Secret. And I think that's a great piece of marketing because people want the secret. People, if you're doing well in life, one of the questions people will ask you is, what's your secret? And if you're not doing well in life, you might assume that you don't have a secret, that you don't have an awareness that other people may not have of something different, something easier, something bigger, something more miraculous. I hesitate to use some of the language of metaphysics and spirituality in the way that I use it because so many people use it, and it actually it points you towards the idea that the secret is somewhere else and you need to go searching for it, and you need to go track it down and find it, and somebody else has it, and if you study under them for an unknowable period of time, one day you'll know the secret. What I want to invite you to today is, what is the secret? What is your secret that you already have, that's already available to you, that you've always known, that you came in knowing, that you knew before you ever existed the way you seem to exist now? And again, as I was saying yesterday, it's like, in order to play the game up until now, the way that you've played the game, in order to have the experiences that you've had up until now, you not knowing the secret is vital. You not being aware of more, aware of easier, aware of less painful. You sort of blindly clutching through your life, trying to get from point A to point B and stumbling and learning and all this stuff. That's all part of the experience that you were crafting for yourself. It's all part of the game you were playing. So pretending not to know that secret is absolutely vital, because otherwise the experiences are not the same. Obviously, playing a game where you don't know the rules is different from playing a game you've mastered and you have the rules memorized and you've been playing it for 1,000 years. Those would be two different experiences. And that's really, if you think about it, kind of what life is. For the first 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years of your life, you're stumbling around going, what exactly are the rules here? what exactly am I supposed to be doing? What's the point of this? How does this work? What am I supposed to do? What am I not supposed to do? How do I win this? And if you really look, it's like with the game of life, what do you think winning is? And is that something that you have chosen for yourself, or is that just what everybody else has told you is winning life? Like for me, I'm strange, I'm different, I'm whatever anybody has ever told me is like the recipe for success. You know, have a family, have a wife, have kids. It doesn't resonate with me at all. That has never resonated with me. I've never been interested in the idea that I would grow up and become, someone who works at a corporate job in a cubicle farm or whatever and does the grind and has a wife and has kids and has a house and has all the things you're supposed to want to have. None of that ever made any sense to me. So for me, creating that as my life wouldn't really be satisfying in the way other people say that it's satisfying. And for me, I would observe the people in my life who had those things that they were supposed to have, who told me that that's what I'm supposed to have. And I would see how miserable they were. And I would say, yeah, that's not going to work for me. That doesn't mean it can't work for you. If anything I just said is part of what you want, that's great. I think you and everybody on the planet should have whatever they want. And one of the big secrets that I'm unraveling as I go is, what if everybody on the planet right now actually already has whatever they want? As insane and crazy and illogical as that might seem, to think that people who are suffering might somewhere be choosing that on a spiritual, metaphysical, much larger level than just this human base level that we interact with, that somewhere everything is as it is voluntarily. And I'm not saying this is the answer, and I'm not saying it's the truth. It's more looking at it to see what considering that offers to my life. Because when you look at all these different things going on in the world through a lens of tragedy, through a lens of trauma, through a lens of pain and depression and anxiety, for me personally, that was suffocating. And it is quite liberating to look back at my life and all of the different places where I felt I was suffering and all of the different things I thought I was suffering with. It's quite liberating to look at all that and see it as voluntary and to see it as creative and to see it as meaningful in a different way than I thought it was meaningful. It doesn't have to be a lesson. A lot of people, when they suffer, whether they're religious, whether they're spiritual, whether they're whatever, they think that they're suffering because they need to learn a lesson. It's not a terrible philosophy. It's better than thinking that you're suffering because you deserve it, or you're suffering because of karma, or you're suffering because suffering is inherent to existence. All of those things are, you know, harder for me to swallow. But I was never particularly interested in school. So I'm not particularly interested in quote unquote learning my lesson from somebody else. Somebody else is teaching me something. The universe is teaching me, or God is teaching me, or whoever is teaching me how to follow the right path. That was of very little interest to me. But the thought that it's a creative revelation from myself to myself, that it's not about learning, it's about experience and expression and creation. And that these things in my life that felt very difficult and very painful were different parts of expression and creation. And that when I stopped rejecting them, when I stopped resisting them, when I stopped reacting to them, that there actually is quite a lot of beauty and magic and energy to receive inside of everything that has ever occurred, not just for me, but for everything going on the planet throughout all of human history, for everything that has ever happened. There is something for you to receive. You read about ancient history, and in some cases, it's, for a lot of people, it's boring. But for some people, it's much easier to receive from ancient history because it's not happening now. And you don't have to judge it through quite the same lens that people feel they need to judge what's happening now. When we talk about things that happened 2,000 years ago, it's much easier to engage in the fantasy of it and the mystery of it and the entertainment drama of it rather than making it traumatic the way we make things that are happening right now. So, really allowing yourself to receive what up until now you didn't think was even there. You didn't think you could receive. Like going to the example of money, just because it's so easy to use as an example. If you are someone who does not have the amount of money that you want, you're someone who doesn't have massive amounts of money. Up until now, it's probably difficult for you to imagine truly receiving. It's easy to fantasize about. It's easy to, run a movie in your head of what it would be like to have that much money. But it's probably difficult for you to imagine actually receiving that, opening the front door and there's $20 million just sitting on the doorstep for no reason. That's probably difficult for a lot of people to imagine. It's probably difficult to imagine truly the experience of opening your bank account and seeing 100 times the amount of money that was in there the last time you checked it. That's probably like, again, it's easy to fantasize about, but can you actually go there? And so what that shows you is that up until now, you haven't thought that was something you could really receive. And as I said yesterday, there are probably a number of secret reasons you think you cannot and should not receive whatever it is you want, whatever it is, for anything you want. There's probably at least one reason why you think you can't or shouldn't have it. And look at that as a creative expression. What if I really had the power to manifest anything, to create anything, to receive anything, to be anything? What if I had the power for my experience to be whatever I want? And I was so expert at that, I could create the illusion that there are certain things I can't have or certain things I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have a lot of money because people who have a lot of money are bad people. How interesting is that? That somewhere on some level, you could just snap your fingers and be anything, experience anything, receive anything. And what you might actually choose is this right now. I'll give you a little extra because this feels like so off in outer space, right? But I'll give you an exercise to sort of play around with this. Right now, if you could, in this moment, drop everything that you are, your body, your face, your name, your brain, everything about you that you think makes you you, if that could all disappear right now, and in the next moment you would wake up and you could be anything, anything, anything at all, would you actually let go of what you think you are right now in order to be something entirely different. Now, again, it's easy to fantasize that the answer is yes. But I really would like to challenge you to actually look and go, oh, is it possible that I'm not as ready as I think I am to let go of what I think I am? A lot of what we're trying to manifest and create here is actually to remedy or to rectify or to fix or change what we think we are right now. And that pursuit of those things, if we weren't what we are right now, would go away. If you were anything else, if you could just go from being this person trying to be rich, or being this person trying to be loved, or being this person trying to be successful in whatever way you think you need to be successful, if you could really just drop that and be successful, and success was your inherent nature, such to the point that you didn't feel it anymore, you probably wouldn't really want that. You would probably much rather hold on to this version of yourself that doesn't have it yet, so you can have the journey of going and getting it, from the idea that if you could just have it and there was no effort and there was no story and there was no motion or movement, there was no need of anything to change or rearrange, or nothing to push against, nothing, no push pull, no resistance, no drama, no story, nothing, you probably wouldn't really give up your current conception of yourself to go and have whatever you want. Probably whatever you want is based on your current conception of yourself. And if you gave up your current conception of yourself entirely, you probably wouldn't even still want a lot of that stuff. And if you did, and you had no conception of who you are and why you can't have it and what would be required of you in order to have it, if you had no concept of any of that, you simply just had a desire and then you materialized it without thinking about the effort, without thinking about the work, without thinking about how do I get from point A to point B to point. One of the most interesting things about having these kinds of conversations with people is you can tell them the most stunning revelations about sort of universal power or being or presence or whatever you want to call it. And their immediate next question will be, okay, how do I do it? And it's like, you can't tell someone how to do it because it is what they are. And when you're sitting there asking, how am I going to do this? From this place of not being able to do it, from this place of it's not inherent to who and what you are, you're not able to do it. You know, you have to imagine like Luke Skywalker or Harry Potter or whoever in those stories, if the whole time they just went, how? How does the force work? How do I do this? How? And obviously there are parts where they learn in those stories because they're stories, but at a certain point they have to admit that they know. And in all of those stories like that, the main character actually ends up knowing more than anybody else around them, and they're the chosen one, right? In the Matrix and any story where somebody's the chosen one and they've got to be the one to save the world, there's always a moment where they have to admit that they're the leader, that they're not following anybody anymore, that they are enough of their own creative force. They are enough. And what if that is one of your secrets that you've been keeping from yourself? That you, as you are right now, are already enough of a creative force to have anything that you desire. You don't need to go and learn it. You don't need to study under somebody. You don't need to pay somebody else a ton of money for the secret. I'm happy for you to pay me. You don't have to. What if you already know? What if you already today, right now, in this moment, know everything required to be the creative force in your life? What if you have been keeping secret from yourself for as long as you can remember the knowledge that you are the creative force behind your life, that you are the one directing your life wherever you want it to go? And if you go, well, yeah, that's great that I am that, and I'm even willing to admit that I am that, but I hate the way my life has gone, so I'm actually mad at myself for being the creative force that architected all these horrible things happening to me. You have to be willing to let that go. That's it. That's another thing you've created. With the ultimate creative capacity inside of yourself, you have managed to create this shadow that feels in pain about what you've created. This shadow that denies that you have any creative power. This shadow that feels that everything happens to you. This shadow that feels like you are victim to even yourself. See, that's why a lot of people have an issue with this way of looking at the world, that you are the creative author of your own life, is because they start out believing they're victim to the world and the way the world works and the other people in the world and the things that happen in the world, and they're victim to whatever they're victim to. And then if you turn that and you go, well, actually, it's a voluntary creative process. Every moment of your life is a voluntary creative process that you are choosing. Then they go, okay, then I'm a victim to myself. I'm abusing myself and torturing myself and putting myself through all these horrible scenarios. Again, it's looking for the reality of pain rather than seeing pain as another creative expression. I know that that sounds very crazy, but you could spend decades, as I have, wondering why the world is so painful, wondering why you are in personal pain that no one seems to understand, and why everywhere you look, there's more pain. I used to feel stupid because I was in so much personal pain that I felt absolutely no one on earth could relate to. But the longer I lived, the more horrible things happened that seemed to be even more painful than the things happening to me. You know, when I was young, I was very naive. I thought, oh, I'm the most pain-filled person on the planet. I'm just uniquely tortured, which is a popular thing to think when you're like a teenager or a young adult. And then obviously, as you get older, you see examples of other people suffering in different ways, and you go, wow, there's even worse lots in life than the one I've got. And if you try to make sense of that on a base level, you will probably drive yourself nuts if you try and grapple with that from a purely intellectual, logical point of view. You will probably arrive at the idea that you live in an uncaring universe and suffering is inherent to existence, which to me is not a very satisfying conclusion to arrive at. If you go a step up from that, you probably believe in some kind of higher power who has a mysterious purpose for all of the things that go on, who sees the pain and suffering and rewards those who are morally correct and punishes those who are morally incorrect. It's better than thinking that there's no purpose or meaning or anything to any of it, and you're just here to suffer. It's much better than that. But it's still not very satisfying unless you're able to put all of your faith, absolute faith, into that higher power, which most people don't seem to be able to do. If most people were able to completely and wholly put all of their faith into a higher power, and they never doubted it and they never questioned it and they never struggled with it, there would be one religion in the whole world and everybody would practice it and everybody would flawlessly practice that. But that's not the case. So it's better, probably, in a number of ways, to believe there is a higher power who is working on something, on some kind of project. But it's not satisfying to a lot of people, and even people who believe in that question and change things and have differing beliefs on how that higher power works, what that higher power is, how they classify it, how they name it, how they deal with it in their head, right? But in most of those religions, most of the people who practice think of it as an external higher power. You move another layer up and you go, it's all one and the same. It's not I am God in terms of like I have, complete dominion and control over everything that occurs and every person and because if you think about it, you wouldn't really want that. An example I love to use when talking about this is if you could be God, anytime I talk to someone who's infatuated with someone else and they really like that person and they really want that person to like them and they really want that person's approval and that person's love, something I love to ask is, okay, if you were God and you could control everything that person said, everything that person felt, everything that person thought, if that person was just literally a doll for you to do whatever you wanted, would you still be as obsessed as you are? Or are you obsessed because you seem to not have control over it? If you really could control everything, you'd probably be pretty bored. If you really, nothing was ever going to surprise you, no one was ever going to say anything that you didn't already know they were going to say, none of that would probably be very satisfying to you. And if it is, you might already have that. But you have to look at your current experience of reality and see if you've been keeping it a secret from yourself that this permutation of reality, that this version of reality that you're uniquely experiencing, everybody's got a slightly different or drastically different idea of the reality they're experiencing. And you gravitate towards people who seem to have a similar experience of reality as you. But everybody's got at least slightly unique version of reality. Some people, it's drastically, wildly different. But you've got to look and really be honest with yourself and go, okay, is it possible that this experience of reality that I'm having right now is exactly the one I chose, is exactly the one I'm choosing, is exactly the one I would want more than any other, as wild as that might seem? Is this exactly the one I want? Because look at the way you try to go about change. When you want to change something, you don't go and change your concept of reality. You immediately go to the way you've decided reality works, and you try to create a change from within that reality. Now, this to like really rationally minded people probably sounds ridiculous, what I'm saying. But again, with the example of money, if you don't have as much money as you want, you've probably decided that part of your reality is that money is difficult. Money's hard to come by. You got to work for money. You got to do things that are beyond your scope and capacity for money. Money's just not for you. But what do I have to do to get money? Do you see that that's not going to work? That within that reality where you've already decided you can't have money, nothing you do to get more money is going to work. And even if you do get more money, it's going to go away because you're still functioning from inside this reality where you think you can't have any money. You have to change your conception of reality before you try and go get a job that pays you 10 times what you make now. You got to change your conception of yourself, and you got to change your conception of reality, and you got to change the relationship between those two things. And if you don't have what you want in life, if you don't have what you want in life, I would be willing to bet that your conception of reality is probably limited and negative. And your conception of yourself is probably limited and negative. And the relationship between reality and you is probably limited and negative. In other words, if you don't have what you want, I can imagine you probably don't think very highly of yourself. You probably don't think very highly of the world, if you're really honest. You might look at certain things in the world and think that those things are amazing, but because you don't have them, the world must be against you, which tells you that that relationship between you and reality is not what it could be. It's not what it even is. If you were in a relationship with the most incredible person in the world, and you woke up every day thinking how horrible they are, thinking how awful they are, every single thing you thought, every single thing you felt, every single thing you did was oriented around how this most beautiful, brilliant, amazing person that's ever existed was just horrible. You would not notice it if you had the best relationship in the world, if that was your agenda, to cut down and undermine everything about that person. And if you're anything like me, you've probably spent years doing that to yourself. And the beautiful thing is, no matter how long you judge yourself, no matter how long you cut yourself down, no matter how long you diminish yourself, you're still what you always were. No matter how negative you feel about yourself, about your place in the world, about what the world is, you are still what you've always been. And the world is still truly what the world has always been. No matter how much fighting has occurred, no matter how much inner discord you have experienced, you are still what you always were. Well, I think that's more than enough for today. Be thinking about all the different things that you're keeping secret from yourself, that you know you're keeping secret from yourself. You know that you're keeping these things secret from yourself. Think about all the different things that you're keeping secret from yourself that you are now ready to reveal to yourself. You don't have to reveal them to the world. You don't have to be able to explain them to anyone. You don't have to rationalize, contextualize, make it make sense for anybody else. Just what are the things you've been keeping secret from yourself that you are now ready to remember? All right, everybody. Bye-bye.